Our resident commentator on the passing scene is award-winning author Harlan Ellison. When we call him award-winning, that's an understatement. Harlan has won more awards for his 58 books, more than 1,100 stories, articles, essays, and columns than any other living fantasist. His film criticism has been appearing for the last 8 years in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and like our commentaries here, is called Harlan Ellison's Watching.
Times is tough for writers. You just don't know how it is. In addition to having a steadily more illiterate audience every year, I mean, that is to say, people who don't read books, people who have forgotten the past to the extent that nostalgia becomes what they had for breakfast, we have this thing called political correctness. Now, in the world of science fiction, writers have to pay attention to what's going on around them, because science fiction is the only 100% hopeful fiction. That is to say, inherent in the form is, there will be a tomorrow. If you read a science fiction story, it says, this will happen tomorrow. Now that's very positive. It's very pragmatic. We'll be here tomorrow. We may be unhappy, we may be all living like maggots, but we'll be here. So that means it's 100% positive. Artistic freedom, thus, becomes something that might be a little troublesome, because we deal in allegory, because we deal in the ideas that are not exactly what they are today, but they seem to be about something that we know today, and yet they're tomorrow's idea. The Jesse Helmses of the world, the Phyllis Schlaflys of the world, the Pat Buchanans of the world, the skinheads of the world find science fiction very, very, very troubling. And they want you to be politically correct. That is to say, you are not allowed to insult anyone. You can't have a character who's an unpleasant woman. You can't have an unpleasant person who has a deformity. Everybody has to be terrific. Let me tell you a story. This truly happened. A few years ago, I got a letter. I get a lot of mail. As a writer of Matters Fantastic and as a critic of the field, I get a lot of mail. And they're filled with opinions. Everybody has opinions. I have them, you have them. And we are all told from the moment we open our eyes that everyone is entitled to his or her opinion. Well, that's horsepucky, of course. We are not entitled to our opinions. We are entitled to our informed opinions. Without research, without background, without understanding, it's nothing. It's just bibble-babble. It's like a fart in a wind tunnel, folks. So I get opinions. And I get a letter one day from a guy, we'll call him Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Johnson says, "You are always writing stories in which midgets are villains." Now, footnote here. When you get one of these letters, they don't say something rational like, "In this story you did it," or "that story you did it." It's always, "You always did it." So I went back through 1,100 published stories. I found 2 stories with midgets in them. One of them was the hero. So this guy writes me and he says, "I am 3 foot tall and we don't like being called midgets. We like being called little people." Well, I thought about this letter for a while, this political correctness being a problem, and I really am concerned about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it. And finally, I wrote him back a letter, and I said, "Dear Mr. Johnson, I am 5'5". I'm a little person. You're a midget." Look, I'm a kindly sort of guy. Never an evil thought passes my mind. I was the only kid in my neighborhood in Painesville, Ohio, who didn't step on ants. I never set fire to cats. I never did any of that bad stuff. But I got to tell you something. Every time I look at these people who use computer bulletin boards, particularly in the world of science fiction, I want to do something smart, like take an Uzi and wipe them out. Lots of them, hundreds of them by the thousands. I don't know who invented these PC bulletin boards, but all they are is back fence fetching gossip things for a bunch of people who have too much time on their hands and too little intellect. Now, look, I understand there's a lot of good information is given out over bulletin boards. I understand they do a lot of good works. I understand if there's an emergency, it's a quick way to rally people. But in truth, I don't own one, you see. I don't have a PC. I use a manual typewriter. It's not that I'm a Luddite. I have all kinds of electrical and mechanical and electronic gadgets around the house, but I work with a mechanical typewriter. I work with a regular non-electric typewriter, and I like it. So I don't have a personal computer, and I don't have one of these bulletin boards. But after I've heard the kind of gossip that is circulated, after I hear the kind of stupidity and meanness of spirit that is constantly being used and constantly being sent back and forth all night long across these bulletin boards, it would be just a nice thing to take a strap and whip these people into submission. I advise you that if you have nothing better to do with your time at 3 in the morning than to sit around in front of a PC, that you leave the rest of us alone and you go out and, I don't know, see if you can find the direct lineal descendant of Jeffrey Dahmer and let him eat your face. Come on back for a minute. After I got done with that, the producer, who's a very, very dear man, has only one eye, but a very sweet man, says to me, that's a little mean-spirited. You didn't tell us why these people are so bad. He said, I'll join your cause if you can give me examples. Well, what I'm talking about here is that these people are mean-spirited themselves. We're talking about unkindness to each other. Because they're at some far place in the transcontinental web, they think they can say anything they like. They're like bullies who snipe at you from the back door, and when you get close enough to hit them in the head with a ball bat, they slam the door on you. This kind of behavior is just simply cruel. They spread terrible gossip. They spread rumors that don't matter. One idiot in New York City recently spread the rumor that somebody had sold a story to Omni that had been at Playboy and had been rejected out of hand at Playboy, and it was unreadable. Well, the story has been picked for the best American short stories. It's a perfectly good story. But this fool decided that it would be nice to bad rap the author, so he put it on the web, and people pick it up. And you hear these rumors repeated over and over again. They're like the chihuahua in the microwave thing. You know, I put my chihuahua in the microwave. I know someone who did that, and the dog blew up. Boom! Well, we know that's craziness. We know that it's urban fantasy. We know that it's mythology. These bulletin boards provide people who are cowards, who have no integrity, with the ability to badmouth anyone they wish. And they get away with it because there's no law at the moment. What I'm saying is these people have too much time on their hands. They're kvetches. They're just yentas. They're not nice. Now you can go away. Go, 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 go. I was lecturing at State University of New York in Stony Brook a few years ago. And one night late, they asked me if I would do a session at midnight. I'd been lecturing all day and having a good time in the classes. And I said, sure. I said, but anybody who comes out at midnight to hear me has got to be a damn fool. There must be better things to do at midnight. I said, but if a couple of people come, it'll be all right. As Freud said, put two people together, I'll teach a class. Well, midnight came, and by George, there was a full room. It was jammed to the walls. People were sitting chock-a-block. And I started talking, and I began reminiscing and ruminating and talking about this, that, and the other thing. And one of the things I said was, I'm going along, and I said, blah, 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 something or other about Dachau. And I went on a little longer, and a young woman raised her hand in this crowd. And this was a science fiction crowd. This was an audience of people who are supposed to be fairly literate and supposed to be fairly smart. And she said to me, and this was a young woman, maybe 21 years old, 21, and she said, you named someone a few minutes ago. I didn't recognize that name. Who was that? And I said, a name? I don't. Which name do you mean? I mentioned a lot of names. She said, well, somebody like Dachau. And I said, Dachau? Do you mean Dachau? That's the name you didn't recognize? And she said, yes. Well, there was a gasp from the maybe 200 people sitting there. Now, to their credit, at least half of them understood. The other half were totally bewildered. And so I began getting a very strange, dawning awareness of something. And I said, how many of you here don't know who I mean when I say Dachau? And at least half, 100 people, raised their hands. And I was appalled. I was saddened and appalled. And I said, folks, Dachau was one of the most notorious, infamous Nazi death camps of World War II. Millions of people passed through there and wound up as smoke, or little bars of soap, or lampshades. Dachau is a name that should live in infamy forever. People who read science fiction should have a sense of historicity. They should have a sense of the past. They should abide by Santana's adage that those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. I said, how can you not know the name Dachau, Buchenwald, Treblinka, Bergen-Belsen? How can you not know this? Well, it was, I guess, the first time that I realized we suffer from something called cultural illiteracy. And it assails the world of science fiction as much as any other genre, as much as any other world, any other milieu, any other purview. We have an increasing number of people who forget the past. That's why we have skinheads. They don't believe World War II happened. They don't know about the Vietnam War. They don't know there were 2 world wars. The only reason they might know is because they have a Roman numeral. They know 2 came after 1. And to them, the war in Vietnam is as distant as the Wars of the Roses. This is deadly for the field of science fiction, and deadly for writers. Because if writers cannot use the reference that they need to make a point, then they are going to have to write down to the audience, and the audience becomes culturally more illiterate, steadily and steadily. We have a great many writers who write television now who base all of their knowledge on sitcoms. They don't read books anymore. New York editors who have no history of what has gone before in the field. And they sell you mediocre writers month after month instead of reprinting Kuttner and Simak and Lee Brackett and Ward Moore and Alfred Bester. And I tell you truly, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it.
You know, we've been doing these for a while now, and the response has been, well, to say the least, uplifting and overpowering. In fact, the Sci-Fi Channel, a division of the USA Network, has had to build a special warehouse in Secaucus, New Jersey, just to handle the overflow of your telegrams and letters, the bomb threats, all of that good stuff. But somehow I seem to have left a wrong impression among many of you. Many of you think that I'm incorruptible, that I cannot be bought. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. I'm a critic. I'm available for purchase. I mean, you take critics like, say, Jeff Jarvis over at TV Guide, who gave this great glowing review to Star Trek Deep Space Nine and then bum rap Babylon 5, which is a wonderful movie. And nobody ever bothered to mention that Jeff Jarvis happens to be a friend of some of the people over at Deep Space Nine. I don't want to name any names. I certainly don't want to get into his opinions. But I'm not the kind of critic who can't be bought. In fact, I can be bought. I can be bought very easily. For instance, this genie cookie jar here. I thought I would put it on here because I promised my friend Robin that I would show it. And we have here, this is a wonderful book. This is called Spaghetti Westerns, The Good, Bad, and the Violent, published by McFarlane. They sent that to me. They hoped that I would mention it on this show. And so I'm mentioning it, and so I got to keep it, and it's about $45. But the best of all, oh, wait. Come here. I got to show you something terrific. You see this? You see this little teacup? It's just a little silver teacup, right? And over here, there's this little plate that's got this little design on it, right? They don't look like much of anything. But when you take the teacup and you put it on the plate, oh, is that hot? Now, this one's North by Northwest. They also make one with Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times. They got one with Marilyn Monroe in 7 Year Itch, and they got a great King Kong. Terrific one. They're over there, but you can't see them because they're not in the shot. Anyhow, these cost about $75 a piece. They come from France. Somebody sent them to me. They said, well, if you show it on Sci-Fi Buzz, you can keep them. And I said, you got it. I remember Sam Peckinpah, the great director. Once upon a time, somebody said, how could you direct such a lousy film as that? He said, I'm like a good whore. I go where I'm kicked. Well, folks, I too can be bought. Do not hesitate. Do not fall back. Try to buy me. For instance, look at this. This book is called Science Fiction and Fantasy Literature, 1975 to 1991. Now, this book has a listing of every science fiction writer and every fantasy writer from 1974 on to present. It's got a listing of every one of them, and it's got all their books and all the titles of their stories. In any case, I've got this wonderful book, and they sent it to me, and I said, well, I'll show it on the program. And they said, fine, you can have it. And I saved $199. Now, folks, with this kind of a job, the perks are all important. So I urge you, do not hold back. If you've got something you want hyped, if you've got something you want shown on television, send it to me. Send it to me. I can be bought. Now, I will, of course, mention that you sent it to me for this kind of promotion. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to say something good about it. I may say it's trash. But what the hell?